Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Brittany Martinez, Republican strategist and executive director of Principles First. Brittany, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me back.
President Donald Trump delivered an address to a joint session of Congress on Tuesday night, and this was his first speech of this nature in his second term. Trump kicked off the speech by declaring America is back. The speech was over an hour and a half long, was partisan in nature, and definitely triggered some protests from Democrats. So I would love to get your takeaways. What are they?
I think this is the biggest circus of a joint address that I've ever seen. Not only did the president come in really hot and partisan, but also what the Democrats did was just political theatrics. I don't think it helps their cause to have the little signs and, wearing a different color, but not everybody matches. And they just weren't on message at all. I think they're going to continue struggling with that, unfortunately for them. And that's the result of the 2024 election, right? You see leadership like Hakeem Jeffries and those folks who work underneath him were kind of more composed and poised. And then you see sort of the more progressive arm they were the ones who were the protesting, outspoken ones. I think he's going to have quite a job ahead of him trying to wrangle all those cats, or herd the cats. I guess that's what we say more likely, herding all those cats. So I think he's got a big job ahead of him.
And I think you saw that a few years with Republicans where it seemed like the further right Republicans, the more firebrand Republicans were more vocal in criticizing President Biden during his State of the Unions. The definitely more moderate part of the party was not protesting as much. And you saw that last night, but on the Democratic side, Republicans definitely seemed more unified. And I want to get to Democratic protests in just a little bit, but I want to talk exactly what President Trump said. Some of the takeaways, let's start with tariffs. Just that day on Tuesday, 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada went into effect. The trade war between the United States and China was escalated with an additional 10% tariffs slapped on Chinese imports. And this is what the president said about tariffs in the speech. Quote, "Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again. And it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There will be little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much." And every economist I've talked to about tariffs say, tariffs equal higher prices. Tariffs are not good for the economy. Watch the stock market. The stock market is telling Trump, screaming at Trump, stop with the tariffs because you saw stock markets plummet when the tariffs were announced, when they were floated. What do you make of the tariff talk?
Tariffs are a tax on consumers. That's what I wholly believe. I agree with you and the economists that you've been chatting with and all these people who work at tax foundations who've been saying this is not a good idea for our country. Not only are we not the best financially in this moment, we're trillions of dollars in debt, 8 trillion of which, mind you, happened under the first Trump administration. But if we want to be on a path to having reduction of prices for the cost of eggs, having lower energy prices, all of these things that he ran on and promised the American people, I think that we need to be smart about the way that we do this. This reminds me a lot when we think about, in the 1900s, where big stick politics and sort of showing everyone how powerful you are. And I don't think that is the best strategy at all. I don't think going after Ukraine and Canada and some of our allies, and Ukraine is a different instance, but like when you're going after our allies like Canada and saying we're going to put all these tariffs on you, you are not, and then you mock them and say you're going to make them the 51st state. And I know that's just part of the Trump charm, I guess, if you want to call it that. I wouldn't call it that, but some folks out there probably would. It's part of the charisma that draws people in, but it's also part of the rhetoric that pushes a lot of people away. I think that the tariffs are going to be a terrible idea. And especially, think about it. He is like, what way to give me confidence? Like when you're saying these tariffs are going to be a great idea, but they might hurt at first, like way to sell that pitch. I think that's terrible. And if that's what you're telling the American people from the get-go, I don't think that's helping your cause.
And especially because Trump, what propelled him to victory in November was largely the economy and him saying, hey, I can bring the cost of everyday items down. I can make the economy work for you. And people believed that. So as a Republican, what did you want to hear from President Trump when it came to the economy?
I wanted to hear, this is my plan to lower prices. This is my plan to keep more money in your pocketbooks. This is the money that you deserve as hardworking American taxpayers. And inflation is going to be reduced. That is what I wanted to hear. I think last night was more of a stump speech, kind of what we heard on the campaign trail. I think it was very divisive. I didn't think he was trying to win over friends who aren't already on his side. I think that was a missed opportunity. He's president of the United States. Isn't former President Trump, who's running for president again and is on the campaign trail. This is our current president. Your number one goal should really be to unite the country and make life better for all Americans. That's not quite the message that I heard last night.
In the audience, you saw Elon Musk, who is the face of Doge, has been described to me as anyone from a good outside perspective to the shadow president. And in his address, President Trump said that Elon Musk and Doge have, quote, found hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud. Based on reporting of the Doge receipts, that does seem to be a bit of dodgy accounting. But what did you make of President Trump's remarks on Doge? What do you think about the Doge initiative?
I think it's really funny that this agency has been created to reduce waste when we already have the Government Accountability Office, which every year delivers a report to Congress saying, hey, these are redundant programs. You should look into reducing them. We already have that in place. So the inefficient agency, which was created to end inefficiency, is actually inefficient. I think that's hilarious. I think that's incredibly ironic. It's like a movie that you're watching, right? And so I don't think Doge is the greatest. Do we need to eliminate fraud, waste? Yes, of course. I don't think anyone would really sit across from you and say, no, everything is perfect. We are trillions of dollars in debt. Of course we have to do something. We should be balancing our budget. That hasn't happened in decades, right? But I also thought it was really funny that yesterday he said the time for unelected bureaucrats is over. And that got a laugh line from Democrats in protests because basically, as you said, it seems to be like the president's buddy, right? It's a shadow president. All of those things that Elon Musk has been called and probably quite frankly enjoys being called because he's a little bit of a troll. I think that is the biggest hypocrisy ever. And, I would like to see good things come out of Doge, but also what we've seen is sort of reckless. I know it's more complicated than just like hitting a button and deleting, or maybe it's not, but that's what it seems to be, reckless deleting of things that shouldn't be deleted. And so what I want to see is actual strategy put forward and a lot of intention, and not just saying like, oh, we're going to get rid of this program when it's being run by someone who's never worked in the vicinity. And I don't even know if he's truly getting insight from people who know better than him on this. Look, Elon Musk, I think, is brilliant when it comes to SpaceX, when it comes to Tesla innovation in that way. And just because you are really smart in one capacity does not mean that you have all the answers to this brand new thing you've never done before. I think that's what we're seeing right now. I think he has a big ego, as does the president. And I don't think it's helpful that he's truly in this position. I hope ultimately I'm proven wrong, but I'm not too confident.
It's really interesting because if I didn't know you were a Republican strategist, a lot of the conversations I've had with Democrats and with Republicans, they say the exact thing, that everyone wants efficient government, everyone wants cuts where you can have them, but we want it done with a scalpel, or more of a scalpel, opposed to just this hatchet-like approach, or rather, in Elon Musk's case, a chainsaw-like approach that he has cutting in the past couple of weeks. And I think in President Trump's second term, the biggest, most publicized 11 minutes of this term came on Friday in that afternoon White House meeting with President Zelensky, an explosive meeting where he ended up kicking out the Ukrainian president. And he mentioned Ukraine last night. He did take a different tone than he did last week. And he said that he received a letter from Zelensky that he's ready to sign the minerals deal. And this is what Trump said, quote, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace. What do you make of the turnaround in Trump's tone when it came to Ukraine last night?
I think he got a lot of backlash, and noticed that. At the end of the day, what you feel about Donald Trump, regardless of that, we know that he's a showman. We know that he likes the theater, and we know that he really cares about his image. I think that a lot of people from both sides of the aisle didn't love what he said about Ukraine and Zelensky. I think that was very politically damaging, diplomatically very unfortunate, and just naive. I'm not really sure what they were thinking, and also Vice President Vance in there too. It was just also a disaster. And, I think it's showing to him like, wow, I can't actually just do and say whatever I want. Like, I actually do have to have a little bit of strategy behind this. All you have to keep in mind, I feel like, to be honest, he's been a little bit of a Putin apologist. The thing about Russia and Putin is that they can pretend to be good actors all they want and say, we're going to be good, we're going to come to the negotiating table, but actions prove louder than words, and they are our adversary. At the end of the day, they've worked with China, Iran, Cuba. They are our adversary, and Ukraine is our friend and our ally. So I'm not really sure why in a moment like this, we haven't been more supportive of Ukraine. We don't have to write them a blank check. We shouldn't write them a blank check at all. But could we perhaps give them weapons? Sure. Could we do other things? Perhaps. Yes, absolutely. But the stance that he's been taking, I don't think is the right one. I think that the tone he struck yesterday was better, and I hope to see that, because, Republicans have always been about national security, our allies, I think more so than Democrats have been. And so it's weird that we've taken this page, especially a lot of us identify, as a party of Reagan. I know that now folks say it's the party of Trump and it's different, but, even to Senator Slotkin's response last night, she said Reagan is probably rolling in his grave, and I don't disagree with her.
Based on these a little bit over an hour and a half remarks, is there anything as a Republican you agreed with, you cheered on, you liked, you said, hey, like, I'm proud of my party in this moment for this action?
I think it's important, everything that was said about illegal immigration and border crossings, what happened, with those young women. It's just absolutely devastating. I am heartbroken for those families. I'm glad that they were there and they got to experience that moment and having their daughters and their sisters spoken about. I think that's something that has been a very important issue for Americans. And can we talk about it in a better way, in a more human way? Sure. But I do think that was important that they were there.
In conversations I've had since November, it seems like strategists have said this, some Democrats have said this, that the Democratic Party is a little disjointed. It seems like they haven't really been able to find their footing, especially in the midst of the beginning of the Trump second term. And I think you saw that last night at the Democrats' showing of the State of the Union. Some were wearing pink in protest, some weren't. Some are holding those signs that said protect veterans, Musk steals, false, save Medicaid, those types of things. Those got pretty roasted. Democrats got roasted about those on social media. People saying they look like auction signs. They look like they're in some basement playing bingo. Al Green shook his cane and was screaming about Trump not having a mandate until he was tossed out. Some Democrats walked out. So it seemed like they were even disjointed in protesting. And then some Democrats didn't. They just sat there. So what do you make of the Democratic side last night?
Democrats in disarray. It's a phrase that Republicans often like to use. I think that, as you said, completely disjointed. We've seen that for a long time, right? And I think that the American people made it clear that some of those policies that Democrats have been touting, they weren't happy with. That ultimately means, though, that we ended up with a second term for President Trump, right? Which, I'm not the biggest fan of, given where I stand on a lot of the things where he stands. But with that being said, I think that we're going to continue seeing them in disarray a little bit. Who is the leader of the Democrats? That's the thing. Who is the de facto leader? We have Hakeem Jeffries. We have a Chuck Schumer. Is it them? Hakeem Jeffries is very young. Is it Nancy Pelosi, right? Because what she did with Biden, essentially, I think that we can give her a lot of credit for Biden dropping out. Is it Nancy Pelosi? It's not Biden. Harris hasn't really been out and vocal recently. So I think what probably needs to happen is a couple of leaders really need to emerge and help shape that message, perhaps with the new DNC chair or whatnot. That'll help. But even when we saw that stage and all of those conversations that were happening, I mean, it was all over the place. I think, though, what they need to realize is that they need to moderate their voices. I think that's what was a result of the election, because you have folks saying, no, we didn't go too far left, that's why we lost. To those folks, I would say you have no business working in Democrat politics, because that was not the message you should have received from the election.
There were a few moments last night that seem to be nonpartisan. There was a high school senior who found out he was officially accepted to West Point. There was a 13-year-old brain cancer survivor who was officially made a Secret Service agent. Moments that received just applause and cheers from Republicans. When the camera panned to Democrats during other moments, I'm not sure about these specifically, there didn't seem to be any cheers from Democrats. Do you think they missed an opportunity in certain moments of President Trump's address to meet him in the middle, to meet the Republicans in the middle, and cheer on these nonpartisan moments?
I think that the president has made it very clear he's not trying to meet folks in the middle. So though, of course, I think it is good to cheer for the young gentleman who got into military academy, or for the cancer survivor, DJ, who is so adorable and fabulous. At the same time, I think that, and I could be wrong, I didn't really see any of that clapping and applause either. But when I think about sort of Congress and the way that it works, there's certain orders where when you're in the minority, you have an opportunity to change legislation at the end before it becomes a bill. Really, it's just a messaging tactic. And when you're in the minority, when you're in the majority, your speaker tells you always vote against it and just say it's procedural, right? And so in that case, I can see a lot of people, so I use that analogy because I could see a lot of the Democrats saying, like, we're not clapping for anything at all, because then you can say, oh, well, you clapped for this, but you didn't clap for that. And then it gives even greater scrutiny, whereas you can just be like this, I was sitting there in protest. There were things that I heard that I was okay with. And maybe if you're explaining, you're losing, but it's always good when we can rally behind good things. I don't think that they were in the mood to do that last night.
Senator Alyssa Slotkin, she's a Democrat from Michigan, gave the response last night a little over 10 minutes, and she's definitely a more moderate Democrat, which was an interesting choice, kind of seeing where the party's going. What did you make of her response?
I think she was right on message where Democrats should be. The problem is that not everybody else is on message. I think that was the right response for Democrats to put forward, because that's what the American people are seeing. They're also seeing the clowns in the room, with like the church bingo cards and walking out and making noise, and they're seeing all of that ruckus. But if they wanted that message with the United States flags behind them that looks very composed and like a leader, I think that she was a smart choice. And I think that she had she was like, I'm a Democrat, I won my state, but the president also won my state, right? And it's like she kept saying my dad was I think a Republican and her mom was the Democrat, right? Like she was I saw that kind of more of an olive branch, like, listen, we can disagree, but we can have civil discourse, but we can be cool about it and not pompous about it. I think that's something that's been lacking in our civil discourse. And so I thought that was a smart choice by them.
This was a joint address, or an address to a joint session of Congress, and it's essentially a State of the Union. We know that when a president's just elected, he doesn't have a State of the Union in the first year. But do you think, or usually in these times, you get insight into the administration's next moves? What insight did you get into the president's next few actions or the next year?
My insight into where the president's mind is focused on the past. The Biden administration was mentioned at least 20 times. And that's because I went through and I looked at it myself. And that was Biden, admin, last admin, their policies, right? So at least 20 times. Why are we talking about the past when you are now the president and we should be talking about the future? So I think that his future is still obsessing about what happened before, even though he already won, even though he's in the White House and his team is assembled. I hope that he's focused on the things he said on the campaign trail, reducing prices, making it more affordable to live as an American in this country, bringing American pride back. But I don't know. I think he's probably going to continue talking about Biden every chance he gets.
Well, Brittany, per usual, I appreciate your insight today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you for having me back.